you very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's hard to see out there, and I promise to try to read fast. This evening, of course, is about immigration, which made me recall the observation of one of our more colorful candidates for president, Pat Paulson, who observed that all the problems we face in the United States today can be traced to an unenlightened immigration policy on the part of the American Indian. I feel very awkward standing up here this evening, not because I haven't given speeches before in my life, but because I know so many of you, and so many of you know me. It's like standing up to give a speech to your family at dinner, which those of you with a large family know just isn't even attempted. Actually, you're lucky to get a word in edgewise, and I have a nephew and a niece here who probably should have left an hour ago because they've heard me a dozen times already. We, as you have heard, are immigrants, and throughout the years at this annual dinner, the stories that have been told always remind me of my own family story, which is slightly different than many of the ones that you've heard. So if you will indulge me, I will like to repeat a tiny bit of my own family's immigrant history. As most of you know, I grew up in a tricultural family, Syrian, Mexican, and American. Our parents were born in Syria in a small farming community around the turn of the last century. I mean, the one before the last century. And were, when I stopped to think about it, wildly independent and adventurous, even for those days, as are many of the people you've heard about tonight. Their marriage was arranged. She was 14. He was 19, in accordance with the custom of the times. Mom told us she tried very hard to get out of it because she only knew him as the guy who stole her chickens. And I could tell you how even at 14, or by 14, she had a mind of her own. For example, coming home when she was 10 or 11 years old from an afternoon in the village and getting severely punished for, guess what? Getting tattoos on her hands in 1915. So all of you parents who are concerned about your children, it's apparently an age-old problem. She fortunately didn't get out of it. The marriage occurred and incidentally lasted for over 76 years, after which they died 18 days apart. Well, to go back in time, shortly after their marriage and delayed by the birth of their first baby, they attempted to join my father's brothers, who had recently left for America, and they were very little as well. But the quota from Syria for that year had been filled, and they would have to defer their journey and apply the following year, which they didn't want to do. So with their baby, they left Syria, crossed Europe, reached Marseille, found a ship bound for Mexico, and arrived there somewhere in the early 1920s when they themselves were only in their 20s. Upon arrival, trying to continue their journey and meet my father's brothers in the United States, they found that Mexico's quota too was filled for that year. And this time it was harder to wait, for they were in a country where they had little money, no family, knew no people except for other immigrants, could not speak the language, nor were familiar with the customs of the country. So they took the steps so many others throughout all of history and throughout every geographical region in the world have taken to escape from a particular hardship and to protect and to provide for their children and their families. They did not wait for permission to cross into another country. With their now 2 young children, they crossed the Rio Grande illegally to join my father's brothers who were already in the United States. Now, just to be clear, thank you, Jonathan, but just to be clear, I was not born at this time, and any statute of limitations that could possibly apply has long passed. At any rate, they were caught, and they were arrested by a sheriff in Texas. And I have to thank God that this happened in the 1920s. At that time, the law enforcement representatives that they encountered bore no malice, was not filled with mindless hatred, and was not afraid to show compassion and kindness. Although he put my father in the jail, the sheriff's wife would not abide my mother and her 2 young children being held in a jailhouse and let them stay in part of her home until they were returned across the border into Mexico. After returning, and as soon as my father could afford it, once a year and every year thereafter, my mother prepared a huge meal for all the prisoners in the local jail to pass on the kindness of that local Texas sheriff and his family, as well as the kindness of the Mexican officials on the other side of the border. I remember, really, when I was very little, the huge vats of tamales that were prepared once a year when I was small for this event. This time they stayed in Mexico for 20 years, and I am grateful for my Mexican birth and as proud of my Mexican heritage as I am of my Syrian one. At any rate, my parents ultimately joined my father's 4 brothers and their families legally in the United States in 1946, with a much larger family in tow by then than 2 little boys. Now, had this happened now, and I apologize for repeating some of the things that you may have seen and heard tonight, but had this happened now, who knows? Neither my siblings nor I might ever have been born. My parents were in their early 20s, inexperienced, unable to communicate, unworldly, and with 2 small children. Perfect candidates for victimization. Because as dangerous as that time and place was then, it still pales by comparison to what it's like now. There are unbelievable dangers now south of the border. Hundreds of migrant bodies have been discovered in mass graves in several places in Mexico, including Tamaulipas, the state where I was born, which I love, in which we lived, and which I have returned to many times, except, of course, recently. Criminal organizations extort, kidnap, and traffic in migrants on a huge scale. And these unfortunate people fare no better on this side of the border. Physical and sexual abuse has been documented and laid at the very feet of U.S. border officials, and sadly, the victims are not limited to adults. Steve McQueen and John Ridley did a masterful job of chronicling a horrible period in our history of slavery in the 1850s in their movie 12 Years a Slave. But slavery has not been eradicated, and we will be shamed when someone graphically chronicles the current existence of modern slavery under our very noses, especially as it relates to children. For although the plight of immigrants is a grave one, the plight of children who find themselves alone in this country is horrific. And as we do with so many things we don't want to face very squarely, we refer to these children who are here alone with the euphemistic label of illegal unaccompanied minors. And I don't want to get derailed into a debate which some might have mentally with me about the illegality of their entry. That would be the topic of another speech which I would be happy to give, dealing with adults and choices made by adults, and why really we should have the open borders we had for the first 100 years of our existence in our history. Today, I want to talk only about the children who cannot possibly be charged with adult decision-making. Let me reiterate what you have been told this evening about who they are. First, they're little. I've met some as young as 6 years old. I've met some who were 16, but they looked like they were 13. Some are in their teens and ran away from home because they were abused. Others left because gangs in their Central American country threatened to kill them and their whole families if they refused to join them or to pay for protection. Others come because they have been turned over by desperate parents to smugglers for an exorbitant price and are abandoned by these smugglers, who are not their friend, or arrested before reaching the relatives that they were sent to. And some are sadly sent by parents with friends or relatives to remove them from harm's way. Still others are rescued from human traffickers who smuggled them into the United States for sex or for slave labor. That's the community of children that AI Justice is trying desperately to serve. More than any other, they are the tired, the poor, and the homeless refuse that manage to get to our shores. And though sadly many are lost on their way, many do make it, more than AI Justice can handle without much more help. More than 52,000 children have crossed alone into the United States since October of 2013, and it is estimated that up to 90,000 may cross this year. Over 40,000 of these children are from 3 countries in Central America, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. And as you have heard, Honduras is now the most violent country in the world. And that is saying something when one considers the world of today. How do they get here? We saw some as young as 10 or younger hop trains. And I'm not talking about the freight cars that we have somewhat romanticized in the travel mode of itinerants and adventure-seeking adults who ride the rails. These kids have learned that it's easier to get kidnapped or killed inside the boxcars, so they rather jump onto the top of moving freight trains that they called La Bestia, the beast, or the train of death, because so many lives are lost when wheels slice through the unfortunates who slip trying to jump from one boxcar to another, or fall off while sleeping, or confront the thieves with guns or machetes, or the kidnappers sent by the drug cartels. There are thousands of harrowing stories. And these children, and I could tell them to you if we had started a little earlier, but let me just say, you can imagine from what I've said and from what you've seen, the stories that these individuals, children, 10, 11, 12, suffer as they try to get to the United States. And these children who are already fragile and vulnerable when they arrive inside of our borders, what do they find when they get here? Well, there is an example which is almost too sad for me to tell. A 7-year-old traveling with his paternal aunt who was taking him to relatives who could care for him in the United States was taken into custody in Texas. The aunt was removed, but the 7-year-old child with severe disabilities remained in ICE custody for 5 days, all by himself. Now, as you have seen, but you may not really have focused on it, when you are detained at this particular Texas station and others like it, detainees are held in bare concrete compartments similar to railroad cars containing nothing other than a toilet sitting in the open in the corner. They are overcrowded. No bed, bedding, or hygiene items are provided. The lights remain on 24 hours a day. Arguably, the worst condition, which has given these concrete brick boxes their name, is that the temperature in the cells is kept so cold that detainees often turn blue. The CPB officers themselves refer to these stations as hieleras, which is Spanish for icebox or freezer. After 5 days, this 7-year-old boy was thankfully sent to the children's home in Miami, served by AI Justice. When he arrived, he weighed 25 pounds. He was immediately hospitalized at Miami Children's Hospital, underwent surgery, and remained hospitalized for 42 days. And I won't detail any further the treatment this already sick boy had to receive. This entire situation is overwhelming, which brings me, when you're asked to give a speech, it isn't just the speech. They call you up and they say, we need a title, and I couldn't think of a title. So I finally thought of a title, and I called it Superman and the Never-Ending Battle for Truth, Justice, and the American Way. And now we get to the part about Superman, because this situation is so overwhelming, it calls for Superman. Superman appeared during World War II and was used to epitomize the American character of protecting the defenseless and the oppressed. of fighting the never-ending battle for truth, justice, and the American way. Well, cruelty and sadism has never been the American way. Torture has never in the past been the American way. Harming instead of protecting children who cannot protect themselves has never been the American way. So where is Superman? He does exist, but he has to exist through the deeds of real people who throughout our history have fought for justice and what we do consider the American way. And the quintessential American way, the essence of our very character as a country, has its origins in welcoming immigrants. President Johnson recognized our essence when he said, "Our beautiful America was built by a nation of strangers. From 100 different places or more, they have poured forth into an empty land, joining and blending in one mighty and irresistible tide. The land flourished because it was fed from so many sources, because it was nourished by so many cultures and traditions and people." And more colloquially, which I'm so happy to do, let me quote from Glenn Beck, which I'm delighted to have the opportunity of doing. After quoting from the poem on the base of the Statue of Liberty, he said, "I testify to you now that the only reason this country exists is to be a safe haven for those who are not wanted anyplace else. The minute we don't defend that with everything in us, we are done. This is not about our money. This isn't about our lives. This isn't about our sacred honor. This is about our sacred duty. What part of the symbol of the Statue of Liberty do we not understand?" As Ira Kurzban noted in an op-ed recently, these children need our help, and as Ira noted, we know how to give it. He said, and I quote, "At a time when we were a more generous, caring nation, we brought 14,000 children into the United States from Cuba under Operation Peter Pan. In 1966, we flew 266 Cuban men, women, and children into the United States from the port of Camaroc." He pointed out that today the world has more than 50 million refugees and displaced persons, and they are being housed and held in places with so much less resource than we have here in the United States. Today, the government of Lebanon currently has over 856,000 refugees in a population of 4.4 million, representing 19.4% of its population. Jordan has 641,000 refugees in a population of 7.3 million, representing 8.79% of its population. The small amount of children who are entering this country would make only a teeny tiny dent in the population of this country. And moreover, it would be consistent with the laws of our countries even as they exist now, because many of the children interviewed by AI Justice have viable claims for legally remaining in the United States under existing law, except these kids can't drive themselves to court, and they can't read the law and the cases in order to draft and file their pleadings. Oh, and they can't speak English, much less legalese. Nor can they find their way to the state juvenile courthouse, where they must first petition that court to be officially declared abused, abandoned, or neglected before they can petition the immigration court. I mean, are these rules serious? There is a real failure here. You know, in a lot of speeches I have said that I first loved this country because my mother loved it. But after studying the law and reading about our constitutional struggles for equality and justice, I came to love this country not derivatively because of my mother, but directly. And not because we succeeded in doing good and achieving our goals of equality and justice, which we obviously have not, but because we continue to idealize the good and we keep on trying to achieve it after every failure. We know equality. We know equality and justice comes or came little by little, Some equality for blacks came after the Civil War. Some equality for women didn't come until 140 years after our founding, when we were finally permitted to vote. Some equality for the gay, lesbian, and transgendered community only came in the last couple of years, and I think we're still trying to figure out how to deal with equality, justice, and poverty. But we keep trying to measure up to our ideals and to keep our promises, and that is the only thing that makes America great. The last time I was here, I read the inscription on the Statue of Liberty. I won't read all of it again, but I commend it to you. And let me just remind ourselves of the offer that was made at the end of that poem. In the words of Emma Lazarus, we said to the world, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed to me. I lift my lamp for them beside the golden door." We're fortunate to be American citizens, but surely we can see that what we have is due to pure dumb luck. Any one of us could have been born in Rwanda or Sudan or still be toiling or oppressed in some other place where we would rather not be. Surely we can see that we have no moral entitlement to our citizenship in this country and can only count ourselves lucky to have been born here or to have acquired citizenship at one point or another. We are Americans, and we are for immigrant justice because we believe in justice not just for Americans, but for all. At least we say so. We said so in our Declaration of Independence. We ourselves say so at every sporting event, at every civic event. We must declare it 100 times a year when we say, "I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, with liberty and justice for all." That's what we say. That's what we have said for decades. And it is not just to imprison children. It is not just to deny them access to courts because the laws are so convoluted and they cannot afford the lawyers they must have to represent them. It won't be easy to fix this failure quickly. We know it's a never-ending battle. It needs an army, and I hope we all join up. Thank you very much.